brief synopsis of what the article is, and then open it to the floor for questions and comments. We'll start on Article 1. The City School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $114,283 for the purpose of establishing a public preschool in the school district of Jackson to be housed at the Jackson Parent School. Recommended by the school board 4-1. Gail's going to present a little bit with just with $114,000 comprised.
So the staff salary and benefits, it will be staffed by one teacher and a full-time paraprofessional. The teacher will be 50%. The hours will be roughly 9 to 1, and then there'll be child care on either end that parents will pay for. But the cost of the teacher and the aide with benefits is approximately $635,000. There are some startup and infrastructure costs that we'll need to make to the facility in order to house a preschool. Those costs are $15,148. And then there are some exterior startup costs such as playground fencing and equipment for a playground. That will be approximately $6,500. We've received a letter of a commitment from a community member that's willing to donate money towards that playground amount. And then we'll be using some grant sources for curriculum, supplies, and furniture for the room itself. So those would be outside of the original $114,283, which is the amount of the warrant. We have some notes from the previous presentations here. If you're interested in grabbing those on your way out, we're welcome to do that.
Hi. Can you tell me what you expect student enrollment to be?
We have estimated 9 children that would be preschool age eligible. It's hard to know whether all of them will come or not, since preschool is not necessarily mandated, but there would be 9 children that would be age appropriate at this.
And that's 9 children that have a specific name, not 9.
Right. From our census information, we have a person here in town that does the census of the babies that are being born and keeps in touch with the various young families that live here in town.
And that's Monday through Friday?
Yes, it is.
So could you project, like, over the next 3 to 5 years, is that number constant, or is it going up, going down?
Like all of our classes, it does vary between 2 or 3 students up to next year's kindergarten class is 10. So there's some variation. We have down to about 18 months of age, and the smallest class is approximately 4, and the highest number class is 8, other than next year's kindergarten, which is the largest group that's come through in a while.
So no real data, just a general discussion about it's possible.
Well, again, preschool's not required, and parents have the choice of sending their children or not. So that's just a projection, and some of these families are in rentals as well, so it's hard to know, if they're staying in town, moving in or moving out. But that's our best projection, not based on guesses, but on actual data from a census person who we have do that for us. Yes, Joe?
So is there a sweet spot above which then you'll have to hire more people, and below which the cost per student goes up? And we're dealing with, when you're dealing with small volumes, then below a certain point, right, it becomes less efficient, and above a certain point you'll have to bump up staffing. Is that right? So what is your hope? Like, what if you could have an optimal number of students per year, it would be?
We've set 10 as our cap. We can go as high as 12 based on our square footage in the building. Our classroom space would only allow us to take a maximum of 12 students. So we really couldn't go beyond that without a significant change in our configuration if another grade level were to leave, and we could use larger rooms. It depends a lot on what the entire configuration of the school would be. But I don't anticipate us needing another teacher for some time. Our enrollment would have to increase by quite a bit.
Sarah.
Sarah Coleman. Talking about this, I know after the meeting that was the last school board meeting, there was a parent here, and their concern was, what about noise factor? I mean, we've changed the configuration of the school once already in the sense that we moved that music over here and art over here because it bothered the other students. Has any thought been given about 10, 3 and 4-year-olds and the noise that they're going to make, and if that's part of your dollars that you have for redoing? And also, too, if we end up having an increase, and I've lived here when parents have moved in with several children, are we talking about an add-on to the school?
I can't really speak to adding on to the school. However, I do want to say that when we moved the art and music over here, it was based on, we had no music room, we had no art room. We were unable to use the upstairs or the downstairs of the basement. It wasn't a suitable space for art and music. So we moved them here, not because of the noise, but because the space wasn't adequate or appropriate for instruction. I'm sorry, can you repeat what your second question was as well? Oh, the noise factor. Both of the rooms that we're considering using are separate, not separate, but close to the door and the entryway, so the kids will be able to come and go into their respective play areas when they need to. There won't be a lot of walking through the hallways. We've anticipated that. And I'm not sure they'll make any more noise than some of the other students, to be honest with you.
And just speak to the adding on questions there. If that's something that the school board in the future will ever consider, I would imagine that it would be a pretty thorough process that would be gone through, very open to the public, feedback considered before the school board would ever endeavor or something like that.
Can you all speak a little bit to kind of the Valley-wide movement and New Hampshire-wide, how these public preschools are becoming part of the public school offerings, just to have some context on that? Because aren't Bartlett and Conway actually doing that also this year?
So, Jessica.
I can speak to that. So, when we were looking at this, one of the things that we learned is that really starting back when Obama was president, it became a priority. And obviously administrations changed, but that started to filter down from the feds to the states. And in the state of New Hampshire, and Pam might be able to speak to this even more, but throughout the state, public preschools and integrated preschools are popping up all over the place. It is something that is coming, whether we like it or not. And in our own valley, we have Conway considering it, we have Bartlett considering it. And so one of the things we tried to do when we were looking at this was to kind of figure out how can we balance the needs of our town and what is happening in our town with those trends. And from our first committee meeting, that was something that we talked about. How do you balance those things that are coming down the line with what's happening here? And one of the things we talked about was, well, we can wait and let's just see what happens with Bartlett. Let's just wait and see what happens with Conway, because maybe they'll invite our kids to come down there. And we had a public hearing. We had folks come in. And one of the things we heard is that our taxpayers, even those without children, they value education. They want it to be in town. They want our preschoolers here. They don't want them on buses to Bartlett or to Conway. So that was one of the things that drove us.
Follow up to my beginning question. I understand where things are going, I understand. But it is not yet a requirement by law. Okay, so given that, two questions that came from the 9 children, 9 or 10 children. Have you actually approached those particular families to see if there is actual interest in or commitment, right? Yeah, I'd like to send you, but I don't know. And secondly, since it's not a requirement, which I get, are these children all expected to go every day? Are they going to go 2 days a week like my children would go, and they would go 3 days a week or 2 days a week? What's the glue that's going to hold this together when a parent says, he doesn't have to go to school, so I'm not going to today, or he's just not going to go for weeks and then show up, or not, we'll just drop out completely. What have you done? What's the thought process with all that?
I'll start by talking about the families that have potential students. And it was actually sort of a funny moment today because I've had a lot of contact with the public in the past couple of days because this is on people's minds. And this is a direct quote from a parent. When we were talking about Bartlett, I was against it. I don't want the preschool over there. I don't want my kid over there. And then when we talked about bringing me to Jackson, I thought, I really value the other preschools in the area because I have a kid there now, and I don't want those schools to go out of business. But if this preschool opens, it's the first place I'm going to put my child. So, and then we kind of laughed a little bit because this is my third year on the board, but this is the first big project I took on. And something I've come to appreciate is that on this side of the table, it's hard because we are trying to balance a lot of interests, and we are trying to do what we think is best for the kids in our town that we serve. And so one of the things that's at the forefront, I think, of all of our minds is that, we know that the townspeople value preschool because that's what we've heard. We know that parents, and I spoke to pretty much every parent that has a child that will be in the next 2 years of this class, they value Jackson education and would want to have their kid here. And they're all different reasons. Some people don't want to drive the 40 minutes round trip to Children Unlimited because they need that time to work. Some people can't afford preschool, so their kids are in for 3 days or 2 days because they can't afford full time. So we all come to it for different reasons, but I feel fully confident that the kids who this would be for in our town, their parents and caregivers would utilize it. And I think that also goes to the piece of, were they going to patch it together and only do 2 days or 5 days? My feeling, and I can't predict because people can say one thing and do the other, right? But my feeling is that they will commit to it because we have a community that's very invested in the kids and their families, and because those families have been so vocal. So it's an 8 ball, a magic 8 ball, right? We don't really know what will happen, but having spent the last year, and actually 2 years, in public meeting after public meeting, even meetings that weren't dedicated to the preschool. I mean, just last week I was at an SAU meeting. I got stopped by someone afterward to talk about it. It's on people's minds, and it's something that people have been for. Not everyone, obviously, but so I think the commitment will be there. I don't know if you all have had a different experience. And as far as coming 2 days a week or 5 days a week, I myself had my kids in 3 days a week and really went back and forth with the school they were in because they wanted my kids 5 days because the feeling from an educational perspective was that it was better for my kids. And as a parent, when I'm not a school board member, I think I know better than the teacher does. So who knows, right? I know I can't give you a definitive answer, but the best guess I have as far as my experience with these folks.
Kate, Sarah, over to Joe.
Can I speak as one of the parents who will have an incoming, hopefully, preschooler next year? I'm Kate Fournier, and we moved here from Newton, Massachusetts. It's a town outside of Boston that has one of the best school systems in the country. And I knew coming home to the Valley where I'm from and coming into Jackson are 2 young boys who get exceptional education. We are in a preschool setting right now, our oldest, who's one of the incoming kindergartners for next year, that we love. We're really happy, we're really impressed with the quality of care that he gets in his preschool setting now. But I have no doubt as a parent that he will come to a Jackson preschool and get that same quality. I don't doubt it, and I think that Jackson does education really well, and I trust that, and and that's how I kind of feel for our little
Sarah.
Another question, to and from school, is the transportation going to be provided by the school district or is it provided by the parent?
Transportation is not being provided by the schools.
So it will be up to the parents to deliver them at X time and pick them up.
Joe, I'll get you after someone new over here, so. Jack.
Yeah, I'd like to throw my lot in on that question because I have a new son, 7 days old. And I can tell you right now that I'm absolutely committed to our child going to Jackson School.
That really wasn't my question.
I think it's an important question because I think it digs into the economics of this, which is an important consideration. That we're not just throwing money at something. I think this is a really. I was in the investment business for 25 years. This is an important matter. I think if there's anything you can invest in, this is it.
I understand what you're saying, but that really wasn't my question. My just question was because it is not a requirement. If we, first off, I think the Jackson education system is excellent. So that's not my question.
Okay.
My question is because it is not a requirement, you know, we have laws to follow that educate our children, so the board can take a look at the education and say, I got a 6-year-old, that child must be educated by law. The parents don't have an option. If they're in Jackson, they can send their children to Jackson, or they can send their children to a private school, okay? The question is, since it's a preschool, and I sent my children to preschool, so the question isn't about education, the question is about commitment. And whether or not we have a sustained population to support the infrastructure that we're talking about putting in place. That's really where the question is coming from. I don't doubt your commitment or your commitment to educate the children.
I think
It
there's
is a question of whether or not there's an ongoing commitment by people who have very young children that are, like you said, do I put them in 5 days, do I put them in 3 days? I'm not sure what I want to do because I have that flexibility. Really, that was the question, is how thoroughly have you vetted it?
Right.
That's all.
And let me just speak to the idea of the infrastructure, because one of the things if you look at the proposal, one of the things you'll see, and if you look at, we do have a copy of the timeline of what has happened, all the meetings and things like that. The reason this is helpful is because you can go back and see all the minutes from every committee meeting we held. We looked at infrastructure every way from Sunday. I don't even know if that's a phrase, but we did. We looked at, like, do you build something, do you go to the Whitney, do you go to the church, do you go to the old library? So as far as infrastructure goes, we tried to keep it as simple as possible so that it would be flexible. So, and with the least investment possible for the outcome that we were looking for. And one other thing to just keep in mind is we are legally obligated as educators and as a board to educate any child with special needs, ages 3 and out. So when you talk about parental commitment, I can tell you there are all sorts of special needs defined. And we have children that need them now, we have kids that move in for it, move out. So that is on our radar, because when we looked at that, we saw that we could lower those costs for special ed if we did some of them in-house. So that was also a consideration. As far as commitment, those parents generally are committed. And just another little piece, we have kids that are not getting caught. And when I say that, I mean their early childhood needs are not getting picked up because their parents are not able to pay for preschool. So that's an example where we're not finding those kids. And those early interventions, we know we've lost some of those over time. I personally can say I've spoken to parents who did not get interventions because they just didn't know.
Joe?
So just a quick question. So what is the one-time cost? So what's the kind of investment at risk to get it started? You said $15,000? Is that right?
For the startup costs?
Yes.
15,148 was for interior infrastructure and 6,500 was for exterior. And those are the one-time startup costs. So without that, it would just be the salaries of those 2 people, plus, the custodial and lights and those kinds of things that we're already really paying for anyway.
But I mean, if I were to run for 4 or 5 years and then peter out for some demographic reason.
I would say to that, Joe, let's say that it really doesn't hold together, Denise, and it's something that the school board in the future considers and says, hey, this isn't working out, we're not going to do it. The room in the basement that we're talking about and the outside improvements are only going to add to the value of the school. The number of times you drive by the school where you see toddlers 2 to 4 years old outside playing in the schoolyard here, and you see it all summer long, you see it all fall long. They're there using it. So having added equipment to the school is only going to add value to the school from a community standpoint.
And some of this is from, and then there's a donation, right? That's helping you out.
Correct, yes.
And then just a quick comment. The 8 years I've been in this area, I get to be involved in the interview process in healthcare. I will say that from 8 years ago till now, preschool and local preschool and public preschool, really the perception I get from interviewees is that it's moving from a nice thing to really an essential thing. So I haven't heard a lot of comments looking at it this way, but as far as attracting valuable citizens to our town compared to other towns, because we are in competition for those transplants, I think that all of them in any recent years really think that that's an essential component. So we need to consider that. I heard a lot of other great comments at the meeting that was in detail a little while ago, but I don't think I really heard it from that perspective. So I think this kind of improves our portfolio as far as attracting, more townspeople that we would want to attract.
I'm going to get to Peter, Tish, maybe in the background, and back to you, Sarah.
Thanks. So there's a lot to this. There's, however you look at it, there's the pure financial piece to it, there's the concept of it, there's the economics of it. I really see it as the most important thing to me about this is really is how we view ourselves as a community, how we will take care of each other as a community. This town is struggling, not in the ways that you think. We have a hard time retaining young people in this community. It is a hard place to live and raise a family here. We did it, we were lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to do that. It was like heaven for our kids. But it's harder and harder. And I think to be able to say to people who want to move into this community that we're going to help you out, we value you and your family is an important thing. In many ways, this reminds me, now I'm dating myself a little bit, of the discussions we had around kindergarten 20-some-odd years ago. Kindergarten back then wasn't a requirement. Jackson, Bartlett, and other communities made that commitment, not only to part-day preschool, but they went full day preschool. That has paid off immensely for this community, and it really dragged the state of New Hampshire kicking and screaming into making kindergarten available across the board. It's local communities doing it that makes the state realize, yeah, this is a good thing. This town, we can and we should be able to do this. I think we're never going to answer every question about noise and capacity, and this is an experiment. We're going to try it, and I think the school board and the staff is smart enough to make some tweaks, but I don't want to be the only young person here. So, I want to see a diverse community. I want to see diversity of ages, and I think this is a great way for the town to commit to that. Thank you.
I think where my concern, and I think I love hearing everybody's points because they're all valid. And my concern is about the infrastructure here, and the school itself accommodating this amount of children. And I think we're kind of heading into another golden age of Jackson. I see a lot of just wonderful young families kind of moving in and really loving the town, and it's great to see. And I am in full support of a preschool situation. I just look at that infrastructure, and I know, we've been through so many iterations myself with my age kids and before I had kids, and don't see that they can be accommodated, really young children in that building with the other children, because kids are taking tests, and the fifth graders and sixth graders are much more serious than 3- and 4-year-olds. And when Gail mentions to me, because I think structurally and that you can accommodate 10 to 12, you have 10 kindergartners coming in next year. You can accommodate 10 to 12 and then that's it. Well, what if you have 14? You're going to turn down some people? I know this isn't going to be popular thought, but you have that pavilion going in. It's taking up more land mass. There's not a whole lot of land here. Should you be thinking in terms of, wow, we got to think in terms of maybe an addition on the school. I know you're taking away potentially the library, and that's going to be floating, and I don't think that's a great move because that's part of what makes the school a great school. And, frankly, I know this has all been considered, but back when my kids were in preschool, it was all over at the church. And, there was a lot of noise and a lot of running around and a lot of outdoor time, but I can't quite see that going on with older kids getting, a good quiet education inside. So I just want to make sure, thinking through especially the building and how it's going to be used, is there enough space, the noise factor, and you're building a pavilion, you're taking up part of your space that you might need down the line. And if these other two towns that are going to vote, if we vote for preschool, if they don't vote for preschool, guess what? People are going to be coming here. You're going to have more than 10 kids, 14 kids, 16 kids coming per class because this is a huge attraction. I think this is great for the town to take the age from whatever the average is right now, probably my age or older, it's going to be coming, you're going to be attracting absolutely more young families, but that needs to be thought through.
I think that infrastructure is something that school boards always need to keep on top of and in consideration. It kind of sounds to me like maybe you should go to school board.
But to reiterate that point, I mean, there's a flexibility here with, I mean, if it all of a sudden was bigger, I mean, the school board, whatever configuration it's going to take a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I mean, these will be things that will be part of the conversation and will continue. And if all of a sudden we have 16 3- and 4-year-olds, that's awesome. And so,
Where do you
well, right, but it's not going to happen overnight. So I mean, it's a conversation. Infrastructure conversation has to continue every year and look at, okay, what's next year going to look like? What's 2 years going to look like? And is this going to work? I mean, it's fluid. It has to be.
But I'd love to see an engineering study, because I know we had one before. When we were building the Whitney, when we put on that addition, there isn't much land around here for actually building. You have wetlands, you have whatever, and the kids need to play, they need space. So that, I just want it all to be thought through before a big structure goes back here when we might be thinking of the school.
So, Tish, one of the things we did think about the initial committee before we even presented the initial plan was, and it was in some ways premature because we really, our only goal was to get this first initial plan out, because that was what we asked for, but we spent a lot of time also talking about how do you move on from there? So, when you say pavilion, what I'm hearing is an outdoor classroom, right? So, if we need to, one thing I've seen is, in particular this past year, 2 years, and I think this is another trend that I have in mind, is that education is changing. It is not necessarily quiet. There are quiet times, but for example, I came into the school today and the 6th graders were nowhere to be found. I couldn't find my 6th grader because they were over here making beef stew for an event that they were doing. So they were over here doing this. And then on another day when I come to pick up my child at 10, they're at the 6th graders walk down to the library. So I think part of it is we're trying to, not just our school board, I think it's coming down from the SAU, from the state, from the feds. Education's changing, so we're trying to personalize things. We're trying to make more of a place-based investment in the education so that we're pulling from the town and from the valley in terms of resources. So I am hearing what you're saying is about infrastructure, because we talked about this on the Whitney board, but one of the things we were trying to keep in mind is we need to be flexible. We still don't know what's going to happen when Bartlett gets a new principal. Maybe they're going to come back to us and want to talk more about 6th graders going over there. We have a lot of plates in the air. We can only do our best for the next year with the idea that whatever this plan was, we didn't want to say build a building for preschoolers because we don't really know. In some ways, it's a little bit of a trial. Maybe next year, if it turns out that Conway doesn't go forward with a warrant article and 30 kids want to come to Jackson, maybe we go back to the church and we say, hey, what do you think about that? But again, that will be up to whoever joins the board in April. So if anyone's thinking about that.
Can I have two points on that real quick, too, just that has been addressed. So first of all, and Tish, this kind of answers, I got 2 things on, although I'm going to have Gail explain one of them, she'll explain better, I think. But on one end, it's right, if all of a sudden we've got huge numbers, it is... But it is in place that we would enroll 4-year-olds first. If it is then full, they have priority over 3-year-olds. So 3-year-olds wouldn't have that, I mean, that's how it would work, 4-year-olds. And there's some others that, if they have an IEP, there's guaranteed spots. If a student has an IEP, there's some other things in place to give priority to that would solve part of that. On the other end, and then I know Joe asked sort of what is that minimum threshold and just the idea of tuitioning. Do you want to kind of pass that to you to talk about possibly tuitioning in from out of town?
Right. And so assuming we don't fill all of the slots with in-town 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, our IEP students, and then we have tuition option for faculty as well that we offer to all of the grades, then we would open it up to children from outside of Jackson.
That they would pay tuition.
And they would pay
that would be
tuition,
revenue to us.
$6,000 for tuition.
Tuition.
Yes. And the other thing that I mentioned, and one of the hardest parts of my job every year is to do configuration. And you know that there's always great controversy about which grades will be combined, particularly the older students. But I've come to understand that that's really a fact of our community. When I've got 2 students right now in 4th grade, and I've got 10 students in kindergarten, I have to look at room space, the size of the children, the amount of movement they need, what furnishings they might need. So we, as many of you know, move them from room to room based on those each year and change up our multi-age grade configurations in a way. We follow a process where we're looking at student needs and sibling relationships and boys and girls, and there's this whole long involved thing, and it's often fairly controversial, as many of you know. So we will continue to try to do that in the best interests of all of the children in the building and make sure that they're all getting the best possible educations they can with the infrastructure that we've got right now.
Thanks.
I was going to follow up on what Denise said. I think probably any resident here over 50, if they were able to, they'd put their kids into preschool. And I would agree with what Jessica said, that most of the residents believe in education. What I think the issue is, and related to what Denise said, commitment. I mean, we all pay individually for our preschools. I don't know, but I've talked to a lot of people. I know a lot of people in the area. And so if you're paying for it, yeah, if you can do 2 days a week, that's great. I did 3 days with my kids, and that was all we could afford. So when it's no cost to students, I would have to agree with Denise. I would worry about the commitment of people. But my other question, I wanted to comment on what Peter, I think, said. I think it's great. I see the young people come in and work at the library 1 day a week, but saving, I don't know what the average, I remember one of your board meetings, preschools maybe around $4,000 a year usually, I think was the average. Offering a family $4,000 isn't going to cut it if they can't afford the mortgage, so I see it as a little piece of making Jackson, but I don't know that that's a big, I don't know, it's just my feeling. So I would say people I've talked to, I'm not sure that the public in general feels that we should all be paying for preschool. And maybe people aren't saying it out loud, but I'm just sharing what I've heard.
No, I mean, that's the purpose of the hearing. We want to hear what you have to say, so, and they're valid, they're valid points.
Pam's got some.
Yes, I just have a little bit of financial information for you all to consider while you're looking at this. So I have back from 2013-14 school years to the current school year. You all have quite a dynamic preschool special education budget. So this is the budget that you have to spend because we're mandated by federal and state law to provide special education services for children once they turn 3 years old. So this is just for your 3 to 5 year olds. In 2013, 2013-14 and 14-15, you had no special ed cost for preschool age students. In 2015-16, your special ed cost went to over $14,000. And then the following year it went down to $5,800, and then it went back up. The current school year it covered as of the 29th of this month was almost $14,000. So what you've got is this expense that's quite variable that will impact your tax dollars annually, if anyway. So if you choose to vote for and pull in public preschool, that variability is gone. You don't have a tuition cost in your future budgets for your special ed students. You're already covering that, so that's gone. The law requires only that the school district provide access to education for special ed students. So if a parent said, I don't want my child to go to the public preschool, then the district has no responsibility to pay for tuition somewhere else.
Has it been figured out how much it will cost each resident of Jackson?
On the budget, on the page, it says 29 cents per thousand. on the tax rate for that particular article. And that's on page, it's not numbered, but if you go to page 10, 11, 12, there's tax rate information related to cheaper. You'll see down, 3/4 of the page down, separate special articles, public preschool, $114,283. That comes up to 29 cents per thousand on the tax.
So everybody can multiply that number by how much their house is worth and figure out how much it's going to cost.
Yes. Michael, I'll get to Michael, then Denise, then Peter, and then back to you, sir.
So my name is Mike Bernhardt, and my husband and I, Peter and I, we have 19 uncle twins, and we both work, I would say, pretty alternative jobs. And so for us to commute to send our kids to preschool, it's pretty complicated to drive them all the way down to the old 3 hours. And having school that happens here in Jackson is a really, really big asset for us. Because we moved to Jackson, considering this when we moved here last year from Florida. It was a big driver for us. And I think the question about if you're not paying, what's the commitment? I think that for me, it's like, wow, if you're not paying, look at this resource that you can use. And I feel like the commitment level is actually quite high. Because for most people with young children, every single family that I know that has young children, both parents work. Every single family. And especially in this valley. Because it's hard to make a living in this valley. And we're not living in Greenwich, Connecticut, and we're living in the Mount Washington Valley where people are piecing things together. So I think that having that access to a resource of public education just makes things work. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we moved here. We were split between living here, this is where Peter grew up, and living in Colorado, where I did. We're like, we can afford to live here, and there's public education that I'm proud of. So I think that's, just as an opinion from a young who's here, I really see that the commitment is incredibly actually tough because of this is an opportunity that we have. And I know that's one of the reasons that I'm here tonight and have talked to friends and anyone that's at the post office, like, can you help support this? And I understand, for people who've already had their kids and paid for preschool, I understand that it's a complicated issue, right? It's like what are we doing? And I also think that this is, to Peter's point, I think this is going to make this town thrive. And I think that I'm proud and I'm honored to be one of the families in this valley, and I hope that we can do our part to support everything, not just preschool, right? It's what this town needs.
I think that question about commitment really comes down to what happens if we're paying someone to work 5 days a week, but it's only being used 3 days a week in what we do. I think that goes back to what Peter said, which is this is an experiment. We'll see what happens. What happens next year, the school board will have to consider, and if it's only being used 3 days a week, then we would have discussions with the school board, with Gail, and say, well, maybe we only try to do this for 3 days the following year. And that's what the experiment will yield. And we really won't know until it happens.
Can I follow up on her question, on her statement? I'm sorry, your name is Pam's statement about the cost of special ed.
Sure.
I wasn't quite sure. So you're talking about some of the funding over the years and it's variable. Okay, so that money must be paid out for any child in this town who needs special education after the age of 3. We're talking 3 to 5 because those are essentially non-required school years. Okay, so if we okay a preschool environment here in Jackson, that money still needs to be paid out, but then goes to the town of Jackson.
No, that money, the dollar numbers I was giving you are only tuition dollar numbers, because currently students are placed in private community.
Because there's nothing here.
Because there isn't a public preschool.
Okay.
So that tuition payment wouldn't go out. There would be no tuition payment for children who are special ed.
But if you have a special ed child here in Jackson, you would still need to cover that.
No, the child would go to the public preschool that you already have set
Which
up.
has special ed.
That's right. Right, it's already covered, just the way that your kindergarten students who receive special ed services, there isn't an additional cost for their tuition.
Okay, gotcha.
There's no additional cost
That's
for
what I
tuition.
wanted to clarify.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, it is.
Thanks.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
That's good.
thanks.
Thanks.
Mark? If the town thrives, like Peter's saying, because we have this, perk, if you want to call it that, is it possible that thriving could offset the cost in some way, like down the road? So like $100 or whatever it costs people to have this?
I don't know, Mark, if that's something that a board could ever say one way or the other and really be speaking to the truth. That really has more to do with what are we as a town 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And if, the way I think about it, this is an investment in our future. And if we don't invest in our future, then all of our tax rates are going to upward if we don't do it properly. Can I say for sure that it's going to cover it? No, I think I'd be lying if I said, yeah, if we do this now, then 10 years from now, all of our tax rates will be lower. We don't really know. But I think that that's the experiment that we're talking about, is to make that viable for people. Peter, I'll get to you. Sarah's presentation.
Well, just to clarify this, I don't understand an IEP, individual program for a child. How can you sit there and verify that that child will be taken care of? You're saying that that kindergarten teacher is going to be able to take care of any child that needs an IEP, individual educational program? I mean, that we won't have to send a child, he or she, to another facility, because we're going to be able to take care of all our individual educational programs here in Jackson if we add this teacher. Yeah, that's the implication I'm getting.
Right, there's never a crystal ball, and I know you've lived in the town for a long time, so you've seen those out-of-district placement costs that happen for the older students. All of your preschool tuition that's being paid right now are your out-of-district tuition costs, because there isn't a public preschool. There may be in the future some child who is so severely educationally disabled that a public school setting is not the appropriate setting. Right now, we don't have any child with that profile here in Jackson, so we couldn't guess that. We will tell you and feel confident that our team of educators, because it's always a team of educators, not just a classroom teacher, whether it be preschool or high school, can absolutely meet the needs of our special education students.
And I just add on top of that, that those extra costs that we really can't ever foresee, we do have a capital reserve fund to cover those costs. So we have,
Which right now, that balance is $116,300.
Right. And also, too, isn't it appropriate to say that children 3 to 5 can come to the SAU and say, my child has seen a physician, there is a need. And if it needs are such that they need an IEP at that age, that's being taken care of at this time anyways, isn't it? I mean, you can take them and have a test done, and if they need something, that's already in the program.
There's a much longer process than that. It's never one person making the recommendation. It's something we've talked about. I can do a presentation in the future about the special ed process. So certainly if a referral comes, then we do educational evaluations to determine if the child's educationally disabled. And currently, your preschool age students who are educationally disabled, you as taxpayers are paying tuition monies that have fluctuated over the years. That's the dollar numbers I was going over. So you've paid those over the years to have a placement for the child to receive their educational services.
But I'm just saying, we do take care of it at this time.
Absolutely.
If we opted out of the preschool, we don't have to feel that we're depriving any child of any needs in educational services.
that's correct, sir.
Right. Thank you.
For that clarification. Peter?
Just a quick question, point of clarification. What's the current enrollment now?
42.
42. And my understanding was that the original school building before the last edition was designed pretty much for 70 kids. roughly.
75,
75,
that's
right.
practice.
So,
Not an ideal number.
Many parents in here are survivors of the annual configuration wars. And we always get creative in a certain sense. But, my fear is the opposite, not that we're going to be inundated with kids. I would, pardon me, would love that. My big fear is that if we don't do something about the school as a community, we'll be faced with closure. 42 is not that many kids. So especially when you have a school that was without this building designed for 75 with a little bit of creativity, there's plenty of room for stuff to happen. This campus has always been a work in progress, if you will. Since I've been here, when we had the barn here, kids went across the street to go have gym, and it's always changing. The best thing about being Jackson is that we're always small enough to be creative to accommodate everybody's needs.
I think it's that creativity that is the important factor there, from the way I would look at it anyway. If you go back to 1946, our numbers have been between 20 and 60, and there's no rhyme or reason to the 20 to 60. It's just the way it is. 42 is actually a pretty healthy number. That's a little bit higher than I think would be the average over the last 70 years. But this is really more about economics change, education changes, and again, to me, it's an investment into the future and how those changes are happening to accommodate those changes. Numbers are always going to be the numbers. What attracts families here is kind of, I think, what's more important than what the actual numbers are. Scott, yes, I don't know. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So just get about Conway, do they have something on the ballot for preschool?
Pam clarified after I said that. She said it did not go forward.
Thank you.
I think Bartlett does have it.
The bond that we're paying right now at the high school, I know that's in here, I'm just going to put my finger on it, but we're going to stop paying for that bond soon. So that money too is going to help offset, basically the 8 years.
I think that's too many years out to really consider.
I mean, it's fine, that's a whole new, because the contract comes up as well. This room's gonna be full again, trust me, when we get back into that.
There'll be capital costs, they'll go.
That'll leave the cost a lot for Don Johnson back in. Quick, Pam, do you have any projected of those dollar figures for next year? Just like.
Yeah,
is there any way-
$89.50, $59.
For preschool costs?
$59 for tuition.
Just $59.87.
$59.87?
For preschool tuition costs that we would have to pay if we did not have our preschool here. So that's higher than it's been, projected to be higher than.
No, currently you're $13,692.
But just a point that should the preschool, and we haven't gone into the budget just yet, but should this article pass, you would actually reduce your operating budget by $5,000.
That's the point I was trying to make.
So you wouldn't pay twice for them.
Yeah, my name is Rachel Fireman. I just wanted to speak to this notion of the idea of children being deprived of educational opportunities. And I think there's another category of students who aren't receiving that, who don't qualify for IEP, which is families, ourselves being one of them, living in this community who maybe can't afford to send their kids to a private preschool. And I think currently with our current income, that would be off the table for us. And so we would not have that opportunity available.
And can I just jump on that? Through this process, something that was very compelling to me, which was not in my mind when we started, is that, and it was raised at a meeting by, we had a number of working families that came to that meeting, and what several of them said, and they kind of built on each other, is that they can afford preschool, but it is at the cost of other things that they feel that they need in their families. And so, I guess in my mind for a while, I always kind of thought of like the parents who can afford to send their kids to private preschool, and then the have-nots who would be covered by other government assistance. And it did not occur to me that we have a bolus of people in this town and in our community that just need a little bit of help. And they are offering so many things to our community. They are serving on boards, they are playing in our playgrounds, they are at our stores, they are running our businesses, they are raising our future healthcare workers. Do you know what I mean? And so that I just would ask you, and how you vote is your personal conscience. I'm not telling you you have to vote one way or another, but for me it was very compelling because all of a sudden I was able to put myself in someone else's shoes. Because in my life there have been a number of times where I just needed a little bit of support to kind of make me more valuable to the community. And I'm not saying we should give people money because they're valuable to us, but if you could just put yourself in our community members' shoes, it's not just people who absolutely can't afford it, and it's not just people who can afford it and have all these choices. We have a diverse community in a lot of ways of people who just need a little bit of support. And if you value education and if you value early childhood intervention, then look at the numbers and see if that 29 cents per 100 matters to your pocketbook enough that you would not make that investment down the road. Oh, per thousand, sorry.
Well, I was wondering about the common vote. How did that, what did that look like on the common vote when we talk about public use? This year is not a fiscal year that we would make the recommendation to the Conway School Board to come with a warrant article. So the recommendation was not made to the Conway School Board to consider it at this time. Was it ever made to the Conway School Board? We looked at it last year, and it was really about the budget and balancing other warrant articles that we had in the case.
Sir?
I guess you're right, it is a matter of personal choice and so on, but I was glad to hear you just say that pretty basically, I think it was brought up at the last school board meeting by another person that was there that said, really basically Jackson is a caring area in town, and I happened to put my children through the school and it was just the original building. And I think we've always cared about our children. I do feel that at this point, I feel the choice would be that people have to vote their conscience. But you're saying 29 cents. Well, I add that up, and that's, another $55 or $75 on my tax bill. I add up the 22% that our town tax is going up. I'm a senior citizen. I'm limited too. And you're asking me to pay 29 cents out of my pocket. And I agree that education is very, very important. But I also feel when parents have a little bit of skin in the game and they're transporting them to and from and making sure that they're getting it, that is another concern I have. How many of these students are going to show up 5 days a week to make this a feasible program for our town?
I was just going to say one quick thing, because it's come up a couple of times now, that this whole commitment thing, and I'm just looking at the people that I know in the room who do have their kids. Some of our kids who are in preschool are in the same place. And, right now my son's only going 3 days a week. Everyone's kind of in a different situation. But it's pretty basic to me, or if you can't afford to send your kids, and there are kids right now who aren't going to preschool, whose parents would like them to go to preschool and need them to go to preschool because they're working. And if it's free, I see more of a commitment because you can go. I mean, you would send them more often. So that's part of
What's the logic, for why you wouldn't go more if it's free?
It's not free.
I think that back and forth has been pretty well fleshed out this evening, and I think that there's just going to be differences in opinions on that. But we'll go from there. Is there anything more on the preschool Article 1? Before we go to Article 2?
It's not an article. There was some confusion when I was talking to people about the votes. So I just wanted to be clear that the vote for this is on March 1st.
Correct.
We usually don't, the school doesn't usually go first, it's just a way for it out. And then town voting is, the voting for positions is the 13th, and the town meeting for municipal is the 15th, just so everybody's clear. March 1st is when
At 7 o'clock.
Correct.
And if whoever's here will make the deciding vote.
So So to hear the discussion this evening, it's important that people show up. I'm glad you all showed up this evening. The depth of this conversation has been great. This is the night to have that. The annual district meeting, please come and know that your vote there, not only on the article, but the body has the ability to change the numbers that we have in this too. We're not asking you to do that. These are the numbers that we're asking for. But just from a process standpoint, understand that you do have the ability to amend the articles that we have here. Tonight's about discussing these so that you become the most informed that you can about the articles that we're presenting, so that at our annual district meeting, you are informed and you know what you might be asking to do that. Jack?
I just had a question in terms of clarification on the numbers. So the operating costs you quoted were $92,500, correct?
What salary?
Salaries.
Right, okay. And then you have the difference between the 114 and that 92.5, which is around $22,000. And you've lined out $6,500 that is for the playground, that is a one-time cost up front. And can I assume then that the residual to the $22,000 is also a one-time cost? So in fact, that in terms of our tax bill every year, it's not going to be 29 cents. It's not going to be 29 cents a mil. It's going to be whatever, 4/5 of that number. Okay. Thank you.
So the following year, the likelihood that if the preschool passes, the following year would most likely be incorporated into the operating budget at a slightly less than what's been this year.
And so I have to follow that.
But I would caution that, the bulk of that number is staff related, so which comes with increases to staff payments.
That always carries forward.
Healthcare costs go up.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to say that cost is going to be
29 cents, the 4/5 of 29 cents, I hear you. So you mentioned that there was a potential for a private donation for at least the playground. Okay, so is all of that amount able to be financed through private funds or, foundations or?
So the way that the budget all works in New Hampshire, we have to ask for everything that we're spending.
Right.
We can take donations of any amount and gladly accept them.
Okay.
So even though we have a letter.
But limited to what you can take a donation
We can't take it out.
for.
No.
You use it for, you mean, is that what you're saying?
Well,
Can you use it for?
ultimately, if you're tuitioning people, right, you could,
That would be a revenue source.
right? You could do it that way, and are you allowed to do that? So let's say, getting back to your commitment question, the parents that were actually committing to this were, tuitioned a portion of that.
one of the
Just to put the skin in the game, because I think that is important.
Probably the biggest asset that this SAU has had over the last 40 years. How long have you been with us, Becky? 2 months. So Becky can answer this question pretty well. And I would say, again, her more than anyone probably has a lot to do with how judiciously boards spend the tax dollars that we have. And because of the way taxes work, the timing of the year that our tax year is, when the fiscal school year is, when our vote is, I'll let Becky answer your question about how much you can receive and can it be offset. But
we won't see any offset until the first or second year, because currently we would know if there's any interest in tuition students coming in. If there is, that could be variable every year, because they could decide to send a student, for their when they're free, but not when they're poor. It will be either income that will go into your fund balance at the end of the year, which will offset your tax rate in the subsequent year. At this point in time, it's too early for us to budget an estimated cost, assuming we might have a couple of children. So we don't want to do that because you can be in a deficit situation on the income side. So we hope if there's offset, we talked about your extended day program for that. There will be some income for parents who opt to do that, and that's going to be a paying piece, is that correct? Did I
Yes.
understand? For the extended day piece.
9 to 1.
So we
is
don't
the
know
school.
what those income things will be, but any income derived will go into a fund balance at the end of the year, which will affect your tax rate because you generally return.
So you could create a system where there's a partial tuition
Yes.
to get the skin in the game, to make sure that people use the 5 days.
I think we'll move on to Article 2. Article 2C, the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,605,851 to support the schools, to pay the salaries of school district officials and agencies for the payment of the statutory obligations of the district as part of the non-included appropriations voted in other warrant articles. For those of you leaving the room, thank you for coming this evening.
Thanks,
We're
everybody.
looking at very well. It was a very important session.
Sign up for February 2nd. Stop in the office.
That's what
Kevin's going to go through a quick overview of the ups and downs in the budget, and then we'll open up to the
So there have been no changes to the budget since our last school board meeting, but I'll go through highlights. On the first page, this is a summary of the ups and downs. Overall, you will see the total budget is up $37,735, or 1.58%. On the bottom of that first page, you will see the increases to salaries, including performance. Additional time, you'll see the increase of a 0.3 teacher, so it's a 30% position for a personalized learning coordinator. The technology position was increased from 8 to 14 hours. In world language teacher, an additional hour. So for all the staff salary increases as well as the additional positions, that comes to a total of $36,307. A little bit further down, you'll see health insurance. Even with a 6.97% increase to the health insurance and increased benefits, it still comes in at $15,000 less than it was last year. And that's because Jackson was part of the group that went out and did some health insurance shopping, and the rates came in significantly less. So that's a good thing. So that makes up $34,442. If you flip the page, again, these are summary increases and decreases. Special education overall is down $11,000. So from year to year, depending upon the services that are needed for the students, those numbers go up. This happened to be a good year for Jackson, where there's a decrease, but those are very fluid. The tuition, you'll see middle school tuition goes down by $23,000. That's, you have one less student going into middle school next year. At the high school, you'll see that goes up. And that's not so much that you added students, but the tuition calculations based upon Jackson may have the same number of students, but if sending towns, the other 7 sending towns, have less students, Jackson's population percentage is a little bit higher. It also is your equalized valuation. So that goes up $28,000. So overall, your tuition for 7 through 12 students is up $2,355. The next section down, your maintenance, that goes up and down. Last year you put a card system in. This year you put in money for steel crack and paving. You've also put in some money for siding the outside of this, one side of the building. So overall, that is down $4,700. And then you get down to kind of the regular ed pieces and some of the other pieces that you'll see. Overall, the staff development curriculum that's related to some professional development opportunities, some curricular development pieces, there's an increase there. You'll see the SAU share, again, that's a tuition contract that the equalized valuation in the ADM. And other than that, you'll see some just 3-year averages on the repairs to the bus labor. So those are the ups and downs that make up that $37,735. If you go to the next 10 pages, those are line-by-line items. And you can see some ups and downs there. And then what I'd like to do is, if I could steer you to page 11 again. This gets back to the estimated revenue. And you'll see that the Jackson Board retained $25,000 last year. So that is a revenue for this year. You have your estimated unencumbered balance of $78,000. That's a projected number right now. So of this year's budget, what's expected to be left over, if you will, that could change, but that's a conservative estimate. Kindergarten aid. So next year, each town has full-day kindergarten, $1,100 per student. And it's expected you have 8 kindergarten students next year, so $8,800 there for revenue. You'll see your grants, you'll see your lunch milk reimbursement, then you'll see the National Forest Funds. There has been a trend where that revenue has decreased over time. So again, that's a $10,000 conservative estimate. You'll see your tuition for summer school program, working your way down, and rental of facilities, sale of lunches and milk. So the total revenue, $176,900. And then you'll see that state of New Hampshire education tax. So the district assessment, it's interesting that even though the budget went up a little bit, your district assessment is less than what it was last year, that $1,522,991. And then the next page, your estimated tax rate information. So you will see that your tax rate is expected to be $6.11, which is a 2-cent increase, 0.32%. And then you'll see the Warren articles below that. That's for the public preschool, and then the trust fund, Whitney Mains, that we'll talk about. And if you put all of those in, it's 31 cents per thousand, or 5.16%.
Questions, comments? Peter?
Last year in middle school tuition, we budgeted for $299, we spent $350 a month. But I didn't see anything come out of the tuition trust fund to cover that shortfall. Was there a miracle? No.
Just in the budget.
It was? Okay, thank you.
Sir?
I'd just like to make a comment, not so much even on the budget, but I've been attending meetings, and the SAU put a meeting on the other day about competency hearing and education. And I'm saying to you, I saw these people here tonight, and they're gone. And I'm here for the whole meeting. But I've been attending some of the school meetings. And I'm just saying to you that everybody seems very concerned about our children's education. But again, I'm going to say to the board, where are they at your meetings when you're discussing all of this? Because I really don't see them. They may talk to you at the post office like I talk to people, but when it comes to being in the actual, percentage, and I've also spoken to people that work in the school and the PTO, you're saying, pretty basically, I'm just saying, where are the parents? I realize they work. We all worked. We all worked 2 jobs. We all had to make decisions whether it was more important for X, so that Y our kids could go to school at preschool or whatever. And when you speak of tuitioning children in, part of the reason we lost that preschool here at the church and so on was because numbers didn't qualify for it to stay here. People didn't bring the children. And, it's just, like I said, I just really feel a lot better about some of the things that are being asked for in our educational realm if I saw a little bit more participation with the parents and
Sorry.
Jerry made it out, a little crucial meeting.
Well, we need to discuss that here tonight, but we discuss it already.
Can I just say one quick thing? Sarah, I hear what you're saying. You and I have spoken many times. On this side of the table, we are here, and our call is to provide for the kids that are in our care, no matter what their parents or caregivers do. And sometimes it's hard to keep that in mind, because I know we all make different sacrifices, but for whatever it's worth, the kids are not here because they're home doing other things, and we are not. We can't hold them accountable for their parents' choices.
Just one more piece related to the budget. Your budget number on the Article 2 is $2,605,851. And again, if Article 1 passes, there are services, tuition pieces in this budget that somebody should make a motion to reduce the budget by, and that totals $5,987. Otherwise,
$5,987
reduction.
I'll have someone ready.
And the board can make do that. The board can make that.
We can do that. Maybe we can make that motion.
You
So we have to pass what we do before we get, change the number right up the get-go, before we even start discussion on Article 2.
Well, let's start discussion.
Well, we have to start discussion.
Just a question. So the 4 articles as presented that's the way they're going to be at town? Because sometimes the numbers of articles are important, the way they're presented. I was just saying.
That's just too, Peter. That's probably old school. Maybe we don't do that anymore, but I already asked that question.
But I mean, if you put the preschool article after the general article, it would be much too confusing.
That's why you put it first. So that
this is the way they're going to be shown.
I learned well from Becky.
Yes, sir.
On item 2410, it looks as if there's been some allocation from a lost teacher to the principal for an increase in salary. Is that what that's saying?
Yeah, so the principal position had the salary was separated into the principal, full-time principal, and a part-time teacher. That's been combined together, so the dollar value is the same. That hasn't changed. It comes down to the job description that we had wasn't sufficient, and we had some inconsistencies and contradictions between our personnel policy and our principal. So we combined it into one position, but she still has the principal still has the same duties that they did before we combined the two.
Thanks.
So do you see where that? So on page 1, near the very top, there's a note on the right-hand side that says 0.25 teaching principal to 100% principal. So if you were to go to the member right next to it, you'll notice a reduction there. But then on page 6, you'll see the increase in the salary of the principal.
Right.
Just so that you can follow it.
Right. I see that. Yeah. Thanks.
Anything else? We'll move on to Article 3. See if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,000 to be added to the Living Maintenance Trust Fund previously established for this purpose in 2010. recommended by the board 5-0. And again, this article is one that's set up basically to satisfy the needs of the contract that we have with the Whitney Foundation that funds this building. And that money comes from kind of through the back door from the Whitney Foundation. So it's not anticipated to increase the taxes. Any questions, comments towards that? And Article 4 is one that's required by law, and it's to transact any other business that may legally come before this meeting, and what may legally come before this meeting will be determined by the moderator the evening of March 1st. And I think I will close the public hearing. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.